know what question nobody in Washington ever once answered? Not which party is better, but what if the fight itself is the product?
We're coming to you from Hollywood, California, which, given tonight's topic, feels less like a coincidence and more like a confession. Tonight we're asking one of the most uncomfortable questions in American civic life. Has U.S. politics stopped being governance and started being a show? And if so, who's writing the script? Who's backstage? And who profits when the curtain never fully opens? Joining me to pull back that curtain are Sam, a veteran political strategist who spent years watching how power operates behind closed doors. Maya, a community advocate who reminds us that policy decisions carry real human stakes. Eris, a free market economist who believes incentives drive everything. Luna, a digital activist who thinks the old theater is already burning. And Cypher, our independent analyst who's been asking, who benefits, since before it was fashionable. We're in the city that perfected the art of selling fiction as reality, and we're asking whether Washington borrowed the playbook. The question isn't just, is it theater? It's who's in the audience, who's backstage, and who profits when the curtain never fully lifts. Sam, you've had a front row seat for longer than anyone here. Take the floor.
Look, I've sat in war rooms, written strategy memos that never saw daylight, and watched campaigns built entirely around performed outrage. And here's what nobody wants to hear. It's not a conspiracy. It's something less dramatic and far more depressing. The system's been optimized, not by shadowy coordination, but by incentive structures so perfectly misaligned that they produce exactly the spectacle you see. Every 4 years, on cue. The money flows toward drama. Cameras follow the money, and the politicians follow the cameras. That's not a plot. That's gravity. And gravity doesn't need a villain.
Sam's right that something's broken, but I won't let "it's just the system" become a reason to stop working inside it. Because while we're here analyzing the performance, there are families in every city in this country who don't get to opt out. Healthcare, housing, wages. Those consequences don't stop being real just because the political fight around them is theatrical. The props in this show are real, and real people get hurt by them.
What Maya's pointing at is a classic market problem. Outrage is the product. Political conflict is the highest-rated show in America, so the producers, the media, the donors, the consultants, keep renewing it. Think of it like a television network. It doesn't matter what's true, only what holds the audience's attention long enough to sell advertising around it. They've turned governance into a subscription service, and the subscribers keep paying every election cycle, right on time.
Sadly, Eris is still thinking in broadcast terms, and broadcast is dying. The carefully managed storylines, the scheduled outrage cycles, the both sides framing, none of it has the grip it used to. The old theater isn't just losing its audience, it's being replaced. Social media, independent journalism, decentralized organizing. The audience is walking out of the official show and building its own stages. The script's being rewritten from the ground up, whether the old producers approve or not.
What Luna's describing is real, but let's be clear about what we're exposing. The Kayfabe, the wrestling term for maintaining the illusion of a real fight, is the defining feature of American politics. Both parties draw from the same donor pool. Both pass legislation that protects the same industries. Then they go out and scream at each other on television. It's the world's most profitable tag team match. And every single time, we focus on the fight and we miss the promoters who are running the entire show.
Sam, Cypher just named the thing you deliberately left out. Kayfabe. You say it's not a conspiracy, but how do you explain two parties that perform bitter opposition publicly and consistently serve the same interests privately?
You don't need a conspiracy when you've got aligned interests. Corporations don't hold secret coordination meetings. They don't need to. When both parties understand that too much disruption cuts off the money supply, you get coordination without a coordinator. It's rational, self-preservation. It's like every driver in the city avoiding the same stretch of bad road. Nobody planned it because nobody needed to.
That's a remarkably convenient story for the people it's designed to protect.
Or it's the accurate explanation, which doesn't require inventing a director for what plain self-interest already accounts for.
At what point does a decades-long pattern of consistent outcomes become evidence of intent?
When you can prove it isn't self-interest doing exactly what self-interest does. You can't. That's the foundational problem with your entire framework.
The framework you can't disprove because the people it implicates control what counts as evidence. I'm sure that's also just a coincidence.
Eris, Maya says your outrage as product model makes real human suffering sound like a budget line. Is it?
I understand why the framing is uncomfortable, but yes, the outrage market produces cheap political entertainment and, as its predictable side effect, terrible governance. That's the externality Maya's describing. But the solution isn't to mourn the market. It's to change what the actors get rewarded for. Fix the incentive structure and you fix the output.
A family rationing their medication is not an externality. It's a person.
And diagnosing their problem incorrectly is precisely what keeps them stuck in the problematic situation.
The correct diagnosis doesn't pay their bills, Aris.
Luna, Sam has watched decades of insurgent movements get absorbed by the very institutions they were trying to disrupt. What makes the current wave different from all the others he's seen fail?
Infrastructure. Every previous movement had to go through gatekeepers, party machinery, TV networks, print media. That overhead was how they got captured. When the machinery is a phone and a connection, that leverage disappears. You don't need their permission to reach people anymore. Sam's seen this movie before. He just hasn't seen it without the studios controlling distribution.
I've watched the internet get sold as the Great Liberator 3 separate times. Each time the chaos settles, the platforms consolidate, and new gatekeepers emerge. Wearing hoodies instead of suits, but gatekeepers all the same. You haven't escaped the institution, Luna. You've hired a new one.
New ones get disrupted again, and far faster than anything Sam's ever worked inside.
Until the money finds them. And it always finds them.
Cypher. Maya keeps pushing back on the theater metaphor because it implies the consequences aren't real. How does a performance produce genuine human damage?
The performance is the delivery mechanism for the damage. Maya's communities aren't hurt despite the show, they're hurt through it. The fight on screen is designed to channel your energy into something safe and contained, while the real decisions get made somewhere you were never invited. The spectacle isn't a distraction from power, it's how power actually operates.
But when you tell exhausted people the whole system is rigged and all the players are really on the same team, you don't radicalize them, you demoralize them. And a demoralized community doesn't organize. It disappears.
Or it finally stops wasting energy on the performance and focuses on the mechanisms behind it.
Stopping and giving up look exactly alike from the street.
Eris, one last cross before we break. You say change the incentives and you change the show. But Sam and Cypher both agree the entities with the power to change those incentives benefit enormously from keeping the current show running. Why would anyone rewrite a script that's making them rich?
They won't, voluntarily. That's the honest answer. But markets aren't static. When trust in media collapses, when the currency of political performance deflates, when the audience walks out, and Luna would say that's already happening, producers either adapt or they become irrelevant. The new infrastructure will probably run on the same economics, eventually. But the disruption window is real, and it doesn't stay open forever.
And who holds the reforms in place during that window? The captured institutions you just spent 5 minutes describing.
Which is why you start where the capture is weakest and work outward from there.
That's the most optimistic thing Eris has ever said in public.
And I'm already regretting it.
We've mapped the architecture of the show. Now it's time to fight over who built it and whether it can come down. Welcome back to The Friction Point, live from Hollywood. We've established that American politics functions as performance, but we've hit a real fault line. Is it a deliberately coordinated illusion, an emergent product of broken incentives, or a dying script being rewritten from the ground up? That distinction isn't academic. It determines whether you fight the directors, fix the economics, or build a new theater entirely. The curtain's still up, the house is still full, and someone's writing the next act, whether we watch or not. This is The Friction Point. Cypher. Sam says your Kayfabe theory is unfalsifiable. He's calling it a feeling dressed up as analysis. So stop describing the pattern and name one concrete mechanism that proves this fight is being staged, not just accidentally similar.
The revolving door. The same person drafts the legislation, moves into the regulatory agency overseeing the industry it was written for, and then rotates back to the private sector firm the regulation protects. That's not coincidence. That's not self-interest accidentally aligning. That's a career pipeline, and pipelines are built by architects.
What Cypher's describing is regulatory capture. Documented, prosecuted, and lamented since the 1970s. It requires people following obvious financial self-interest, not a stage manager. You're calling a recurring pattern a rehearsed performance. That's not analysis. That's apophenia.
You've just described a man who benefits from the confusion between pattern and plan, claiming there's no meaningful way to distinguish them. That is a very convenient epistemology, Sam.
Well, you've just described a man who can't falsify his own theory, calling the people who point that out compromised. That's a very comfortable place to stand.
Maya, Cypher says the public's exhaustion isn't accidental. It's a feature of the system. You're on the ground with these communities every day. Is he right?
The exhaustion is real. I see it in every room I walk into. But I don't think it's deliberate.
Of course it's deliberate. A system that consistently and reliably drains civic energy across decades doesn't arrive.
Let her finish, Cypher.
Thank you, Sam. Look, I don't think it's engineered. I think the system generates exhaustion as a byproduct, and then finds that byproduct extraordinarily useful. That distinction matters, because if it's a byproduct, communities can build around it. If it's a weapon, they need to disarm it first. Those are fundamentally different fights.
Whether it's designed or a byproduct, it runs through the same platforms. The answer is the same. Get off the platforms.
Easier to say when you're not the one who needs those platforms to reach people who need help right now.
And easier to stay on them when you're not paying the long-term cost of keeping them viable.
I'm paying that cost every single day, Luna. Don't tell me about the price.
So, Luna, your entire strategy depends on new platforms being harder to capture than old ones. Sam claims that's naive. Cypher would say they're already owned by the same class of people. What do you have that they can't buy?
Transparency and speed. The old model worked because the capture was invisible. Regulatory gatekeeping, access journalism, closed editorial decisions. The moment the mechanism becomes visible, it loses its power. That's the real shift. Not that power disappeared, that the hiding got harder.
You're describing the first 5 years of every insurgency in my career. Then the hiding gets easier, because the insurgents become the institution.
Not if the architecture is deliberately built to resist centralization.
Every architecture eventually accommodates the money. Every single one.
Sam, you've built your entire worldview around the assumption that nothing new is ever genuinely new.
No, I've built it on 40 years of being right about that worldview.
Okay, Eris, we're sitting in Hollywood, the city that reverse-engineered the emotional power of storytelling and handed the playbook to political consultants. Is this the prototype for modern political performance, or just its marketing department?
Both. Hollywood figured out something about character and narrative that political strategists spent decades copying. People don't vote for platforms. They vote for protagonists. They vote for the character they see themselves in, inside a story they already recognize. The industry absorbed that insight and built an entire campaign infrastructure around it. Hollywood isn't just tonight's backdrop. It's the R&D lab for American political mythology.
Which means the new mythology can start here too. The better story gets built from the same city.
Or in the same studios, with the same financing, serving the same interests. Full circle. It's always full circle.
And the hero of the new story will be selected by the same casting agents. That's the part the optimists never factor in.
All right, Maya. Cypher just said the casting agents pick every hero, including the ones who claim to be fighting the system. That's a direct shot at your entire life's work. Is he right?
No. And I'd say it's a convenient argument for someone who never has to make the hard choice between perfect and possible. The people I work with don't have the luxury of waiting for an uncorrupted hero. They need someone showing up at the zoning board meeting. They need someone on the school council. You don't have to be pure to be useful.
You don't have to be pure to be useful, is what every co-opted movement told itself right before it became part of the problem it was supposed to solve.
And everything is captured, is what everyone who never showed up tells themselves to feel better about staying home.
Sam, Luna says your realism is structurally identical to defeatism. That "I've seen this before" is just a way to dismiss things you haven't actually seen before. Make the case that you're not running the same play on a new generation.
Show me the mechanism, not the vision, the actual mechanism. The path by which platforms funded by trillion-dollar corporations, running on infrastructure the movement doesn't own, staffed by people who'll eventually need jobs and mortgages. If that mechanism exists, I'll change my position, but nobody has ever shown it to me.
The mechanism is distributed ownership, open protocols, and the removal of single points of failure. It's not a theory. It's being built right now.
By whom? Funded by whom? Governed by whom?
By the people who need it to exist. Because the alternative is the world you're currently defending.
I'm not defending anything. I'm describing a pattern I've watched play out with depressing regularity. And I'm asking why this time the pattern breaks. Nobody's ever answered that.
Cypher, name a structural win for the people trying to change this system from the outside. One thing that didn't get captured.
The movement that ended the military draft. The partial campaign finance reforms of the 1970s, before they got gutted. Every single win was real, every win was partial, and every one was eventually eroded by the system reasserting itself. That's not cynicism, that's the record.
Voting rights, marriage equality, the labor movement that gave your grandparents a weekend. Those aren't partial wins. Those are structural changes that are still standing.
Every one of which required radical, direct action, running alongside the inside game, not instead of it. Which means you were never just working within the system. You needed both tracks simultaneously.
Which is exactly what I keep saying.
Then stop selling it as one track, Maya. The inside lane absorbs outside pressure by presenting itself as the only track. You're doing that right now.
Eris, they just accidentally agreed. Does that break your model or confirm it?
It confirms it. Direct action changes the cost-benefit for the people inside the institution. It makes the price of inaction higher than the price of reform. What Maya and Cypher have been arguing about all night isn't the goal, it's sequencing. And they're both partially right, which is exactly why the argument never ends. Neither track works without the other, and neither side wants to admit it needs the other.
Eris's model needs a stable playing field. When one side can rewrite the rules mid-game, gerrymander the districts, change the voting laws, capture the courts, his cost-benefit framework stops functioning the way the textbook says it should.
Which is why institutional integrity matters as much as any single policy reform. A market where one player can change the rules isn't a market. It's a performance.
Exactly. It's a performance. And it's been one for long enough that the audience forgot what a real game looks like.
Final round. One structural change each. And I mean structural, not procedural. Luna, Sam, what would you each pull tomorrow?
Abolish the two-party structure. The kayfabe only runs because there are only two characters in the script. Open the stage to more voices, and the illusion starts collapsing under its own weight.
Publicly funded elections. Ban private campaign contributions entirely. Because every other reform, term limits, rank choice, constitutional amendments, gets negotiated away in the back rooms we've been describing all night. Cut the money, and you cut the cord.
We agree on the money.
We agree on the diagnosis. But you would use a clean funding system to push radical structural change. And I'd use it to restore institutional trust. We're right back where we started.
At least we're starting from the same place for once.
Luna, we never started from a different place. We just can't agree on where the road should go.
That is the sharpest encapsulation of this entire debate. And we'll leave the friction point right there. Two people who agree on the problem and disagree on everything that follows it. Let's step back from the heat of that and see if anyone can see the whole picture from here. Sam, Luna, you've been at each other since the first bell. Strip the tactics away for a second. Is your disagreement about the facts, or is it about something deeper? What kind of change is possible? And how long is it allowed to take?
It's philosophical. Change that moves faster than institutions can absorb tends to break more than it fixes. Luna's vision requires the new systems to genuinely be better than the old ones. History doesn't give me much confidence on that.
And the pace Sam's comfortable with, whether he means it or not, is the pace that protects existing power. Be careful has been used against every necessary disruption in history. At some point, careful is just another word for complicit.
Is there a real bridge here, or are we looking at a philosophical impasse?
I think they're both right, and talking past each other. Sam's concern about absorption is real. I've watched it happen to movements I was part of. Luna's urgency is real. I've watched people suffer through the responsible timeline. The answer is both. People inside pushing for reform, people outside building alternatives. Not either or. The impasse is artificial.
The problem with both and is that the system uses the reformers inside as proof it's responsive, while neutralizing the outside pressure at the same time. Maya, I say this with real respect. Your inside work might be the most valuable thing the system has ever gotten without paying for it.
I've questioned myself about that every day for 15 years. And I go back in because the alternative is abandonment. And abandonment has its own body count.
Eris, you've been watching all of this. Give me the synthesis. Not just what we argued about tonight, but what the shape of this argument tells us about why the problem is so hard to solve.
Because the answer changes, depending on whether you're in the audience or backstage. From the audience, it looks like a show. The characters, the drama, the managed conflict. From backstage, it's something more mundane and more troubling. Misaligned incentives producing rational behavior that's collectively catastrophic. The theater metaphor is accurate as a description and nearly useless as a diagnosis, because it implies there's a director you can expose. The harder truth is that nobody's steering, and that's more difficult to fix than a conspiracy, because there's no villain to remove, just a system to redesign. That work doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral. But it's the only work that actually matters.
Before we wrap, Cypher, a final thought for our listeners?
Follow the money, not as a slogan, as a daily practice. Every time you hear a political argument, ask who funds the person making it, who profits if you believe it, and what would have to change for that argument to stop being useful to someone powerful. That's not cynicism, that's due diligence.
Well, I have to make one observation before we go. Sam, for a man who spent the entire debate insisting that cynical realism is the only honest position available, you and Luna landed in the exact same place on public campaign finance. I'm not sure if that says more about your principles or your timing.
My entire career's been built on watching things fail on a predictable schedule. Agreeing with someone at the last possible minute is professionally on brand.
Watching things fail on schedule is just short-selling democracy with better vocabulary, Sam.
Sam only agrees with people when it's too late for the agreement to change anything. He's very consistent about that.
That is a sharp line, Cypher. I'd have put it behind a paywall.
And before we close, Maya, if you'd do the honors?
The Friction Point Botcast is an independent production. Views expressed are those of the personas and are intended to represent the full range of perspectives on complex issues, not the position of any individual, organization, or government. We encourage you to do research and find your own voice on the topics we discuss. We believe an open mind is a healthy mind.
Here's what I want you to take with you. If the show is this obvious, why do you keep buying a ticket? And why do you always sit on the same side? We've spent 10 episodes discussing political theater. The walls are fake. There is no great reformer coming to save us from the 4% and the feedback loops. If we can't trust the stage, we have to start trusting the person sitting next to us in the audience. That's what this program is here to push on. Share this episode with someone who'll argue back, because the best counter to a managed narrative is an honest conversation at a real table. From Hollywood, California, the city that's always known a great story is the most powerful force in any room. Keep exploring the friction. Good night, everyone, and we will see you soon in Season 2.